Welcome back, everyone, to this week's edition of the Cart Barn Podcast. Chris Limley and Greg DeWalt, excited to have you join us again this week. Continuing our documentation of the Golf Channel in its early days with Alabama roots, today we're joined by John Gibbs. He's the cousin of founder Joe Gibbs, a really, really good player in his own right. He played in the U.S. Senior Open, some U.S. Senior AMs, became one of the top-ranked amateurs not only in the state but in the country. And John has some very cool stories of the early days of the Golf Channel.
Yeah, it's been fascinating to document those early days of the Golf Channel and everything that was going on. You know, they were trying to raise money, they were trying to get staffing together, they were trying to build studios, and it was all like, we got to get this done right now. And when you see the finished product and what it's evolved into today, it's just amazing how it all came together and at the right time, right people at the right time, I guess you could say. So
Yeah.
why don't we just go ahead and jump in with John Gibbs?
Welcome back to the Cart Barn Podcast. Today we welcome John Gibbs. John, welcome to the Cart Barn.
Well, thank you very much. I'm excited to be here.
We're glad to have you.
Yeah, we're looking forward to hearing your stories, and some of them probably will be true.
I was advised by my wife to make sure to have a disqualifier early on and make sure everybody understands that a lot of this stuff is 30 plus years old in my memory. And so I can't verify everything to be exactly factual. Plus, I don't let the truth get in the way of a good story.
That's what we're after here on the Cart Barn.
That's right. Well, John, for the people listening that don't know your story, and you were with the Golf Channel from the beginning and even before. So let's step back in time and let's get started there with.
Okay, well, yeah, it was one of the most exciting and privileged things that I've been a part of. It turned out even better than we anticipated at the beginning, but I'll go back to actually before the beginning and kind of bring us up to the point where the Golf Channel became obvious that we were going to try to do that. It actually, you might say, started prior to, well, let's just go back to Joe Gibbs was actually the founder of the Golf Channel, and he and I are first cousins. We grew up in the same little town right here in Oneonta, Alabama. Both went to high school here. He's 5 years younger than I, and so we really didn't have much association other than just passing in our childhood because of our age difference. But then as we became adults and got to know each other a little better, we realized we had a fair amount in common. So we would have lunch together and, chat about this, that, and the other. But he was in the cable TV business, he was a partner in a company called Masada. And so that was his intro, you might say, into the TV business. Mine was, I was in IT, information technology, at a little company that headquartered in Homewood, Alabama, and he had hired me a couple of times to do some work. So he was familiar with my area of expertise. And we would have lunch occasionally. So he calls me one day and asked me if I would like to have lunch, that he wanted to run something by me. Now, this was not too long after the 1990 PGA Championship that was held at Shoal Creek, where Joe had a home. And this is sort of you might say, I think, one of the most interesting parts of the genesis of the Golf Channel. They came, the committee, the tournament committee, one of the members came to Joe, and Joe had a guest house, and they asked if he would be willing to let one of the players stay on the facility and stay in his guest house. And he said, well, yeah. uh, who would the player be? And they said Ben Crenshaw. So, of course, Ben was a big name player, and he was more than happy to allow him to stay there. But then later on, Gary Neal Drummond wanted Ben Crenshaw to stay at his home, which was off the property, and Ben says, no, I want to stay on the property. It'd be more convenient for me. And he said, well, I'll just helicopter you in each day, so it'll be much like you're staying there. So he agreed to stay with Gary Neal Drummond. And they came back to Joe and said, Crenshaw is going to stay with the Drummonds. Well, of course, Joe was disappointed and said, okay. Well, then later on in the week before the tournament, they came back to, well, actually it was, I think as I remember it, was like the Sunday before the tournament, and said, we have another player who has come into town. He and his wife are not real happy with their accommodations at their hotel and wondered if you'd let them stay in your guest house. And he's like, well, I'm not really that interested anymore. And he said, well, it's Arnold Palmer. And then we're like, oh, okay, well, yeah, we'll let him stay in the guest house. So Arnold Palmer came. He and Joe met and hit it off, and it was the beginning of a friendship. They seemed to get off right off the bat. They spent a lot of time together. Joe walked with him on the golf course while he played his practice rounds. They drank some wine in the driveway, and just had a good week. And later on, Mr. Palmer and Winnie, his wife, reciprocated and had Joe and his wife down to, at that time, they had a home at Isleworth in Orlando. They spent close to a week there with them. So that was the beginning of a friendship. Now back to when Joe called me for lunch, and he said, now I'm going to run something by you that I've been thinking about and I'm really serious about, but I have to swear you to secrecy before I tell you what it's about. And I said, well, sure. And he said, well, I'm thinking about starting a 24/7 golf channel. What do you think? And of course, he knew I was an avid golfer. And so I immediately said, oh, I think it's a great idea. I mean, I know how I am. I know how other golfers are. We love to watch golf. We love to watch instructional material. We love to, all that, if it's golf, we like to watch it. And I said, I think it's a great idea if we can make it work financially. And he said, well, yeah, we're working on that. So he said, would you be interested in coming to work for the Golf Channel and be their vice president of IT? And I said, yes. It was a decision I made without a lot of hesitation. Even though I had my own little business, we were doing okay. We were making a living, but this was exciting, and I was really wanted to be a part of it. Besides that, to just tell you straight out, Joe is a very intelligent individual, and he has a work ethic beyond anybody I've ever worked with, and his track record had been good to date. So I figured hitching my wagon to him wouldn't be all bad. And turns out I was right in that respect. So anyway, that's when I became, you might say, involved in the Golf Channel. This was, as I recall, about the end of 1990 or the beginning of 91. I can't remember exactly, but in that time frame somewhere. And we started to work. He also ran this by several other people that he knew that he would like to have involved in the Golf Channel as employees. There were, I recall, 6 of us, either in the Birmingham area or people that he knew that he would like to have us involved. And we started to work on the Golf Channel. Now, back to the Arnold Palmer and how he fits into this thing. he uh, he obviously, we needed someone. I mean, Joe was well known in some business circles, but in the golf circles, he was an unknown quantity. So we needed some entry into the golf world, you might say. His friendship with Arnold Palmer, and I can't say this for sure, but I think it's and Joe could verify this if you talk to him. But the fact that he became involved and got to be friends with Arnold Palmer probably headed him in the direction of golf as a niche program, because he'd been thinking about niche programming for some time, because the industry was headed toward, I'm talking about the cable industry, was headed toward digital versus analog, which would allow shelf space for literally hundreds of channels. So he recognized early that niche programming was going to be the thing. So I think the Arnold Palmer connection settled him pretty well on golf. Plus a lot of other factors that, of all the sports, particularly golf has the best demographics when it comes to selling advertising on TV. I mean, the audience is better educated, therefore, higher incomes. They would be a good audience to advertise, particularly high-end products. So Joe calls Arnold and says, I have a business opportunity I'd like to offer to you. Could we get together? And he said, well, as a matter of fact, I'm flying from Orlando back to Latrobe for the summer. I could come by, fly to Birmingham and land there if you could get us a place to meet. So Joe did, right there at the private airport in Birmingham. He got a meeting room. So Arnold flies in. He presents to Arnold his idea, asked him if he would be his partner, that he and Arnold would share partnerships equally. And Mr. Palmer shook his hand and said, partner. And that was the beginning of his involvement in the Golf Channel. What that meant to us was instant credibility in the golf world. Everybody in the world knew Arnold Palmer. And it opened specifically some doors to Mark McCormick with IMG and to the PGA Tour. In fact, the PGA Tour made a small investment in the Golf Channel, and so did IMG. IMG was particularly important early on because IMG had secured the worldwide rights to the European Tour. And of course, early on, we had no real tournament coverage. We couldn't cover a tournament. We had no rights to that. But with this opening to IMG, that gave us some programming that worked out for both parties, a win-win. We needed the programming, and they needed the exposure. And it's kind of hard to remember when the European Tour was almost no factor in the world, certainly in the U.S., but at that particular time, in early 90s, about the only European tours that players that were known to America were those who came over here and actually played on the PGA Tour.
Mm-hmm.
But the tour in Europe was hardly known at all. Now, to go back to slightly to how we, and when I say we, I mean mostly Joe, because he was going at this thing full time, completely. Every now and then he might help, ask me for something, but not much. He was handling this thing almost by himself. But putting together the financing for the Golf Channel was a huge deal. And, when I talk to people, particularly back when the Golf Channel was still in its early stages, people would say, "Oh, what a great idea." And it was a great idea. But as I pointed out, I, unlike Joe, I, if you took all the great ideas I've had, I could have, if I had properly implemented them, I could have made a house full of money. But a great idea is worth nothing if you do nothing with it. And Joe not only was willing to do it, but he was one of the few people who could pull this off. We raised approximately $6 million initially from people that Joe knew and knew Joe. That money was just for preliminary work that we needed to do to develop our business plans, secure like a transponder on a satellite and some other things that were, pretty pricey stuff. So that money was spent pretty quickly, and we, in order to secure what we called our big money to get us actually launched, Joe contacted several people, but the main ones who came up with our big money they were 6 of the largest 10 cable operators in the country at that time. Comcast being one of those operators. They agreed to put up $10 million apiece, totaling obviously $60 million. And our business plan that we presented had us at cash break even with an initial investment of $110 million. So they asked us to come back with a plan to do it with 60, and Joe furnished them a plan that would show we could do that. We were pretty sure that it wouldn't work. So anyway, we got the $60 million that we needed to launch. We moved to Orlando, secure some warehouse space, a lot of warehouse space, quite frankly, built it out into studios and offices, hired people. I mean, it was like drinking from a fire hose. All of us were working hours and hours every week. I can't tell you how many hours I was working. It was day and night for all of us. I mean, I wasn't the only one. We were all going, just as hard as we could go, trying to meet a deadline. We moved down in the summer of '94, and our launch date was January 17th, 1995. So we just had a few months to put everything together and get talent, get technical people, get business people. I mean, we had to hire about 200 people in a short. So it was and build out all these studios, offices, and so forth. So it was a big deal. We launched on our given date, January 17th, 1995. I stayed with them through 2000. Well, not through 2000, but into early 2000. In the course of our business, we secured some other financing because, as we knew initially, it was going to take more than the $60 million to get it to cash break even. And I don't remember the exact dates, but we got literally within about a week of not being able to make payroll, while Joe was putting together a deal, as it turns out, with Fox, where they infused us with another $50 million, and for that they got a third, 33% of the holdings. Now, that obviously was a big deal. I mean, it was the difference between shutting down and not shutting down. Then later on in 1999, Comcast had been buying up a number of the people who had initially those cable companies that initially put up the 60 million. They'd been buying it up, and they'd gotten to the point where they had about 42% of the stock, and they came to us. Of course, as I mentioned, Fox had 33%, and they were trying to. It was sort of a race between Comcast and Fox to get control. Comcast came to Joe, and knowing that the initial management group was granted some stock that, and some other people that had come along after that, enough to about 13%, which would have been more than enough to put them over the 50 plus to gain control. So we agreed to sell our holdings to Comcast at that point in a lump sum. All of us, we had to either all sell or not sell. So we did. We sold out to Comcast, and so that was in late '99, and then I left the Golf Channel in actually March 31st, 2000. And so I would have to say without any hesitation that the Golf Channel has been a success in almost any respect. So it was a privilege and an honor to have served from the very beginning in that endeavor. But it led me to a situation where I wanted to go. And I think you want to hear something about my golf as a golfer.
Yeah, we absolutely do. But I want to go back just a minute and
Sure.
to the days of that July, or that's in the summer I think you said 94, and you're building out a warehouse and studios and suites and hiring people, and that had to be just completely organized chaos at best.
And oftentimes it seemed more like chaos than organized.
Yeah. Talk us through some of that behind the scenes of putting all of that together. That's just phenomenal.
Well, it was, my job in particular was getting computer systems and a lot of the technical stuff that interfaced with people, and also the broadcasting. That so my focus was pretty narrow relative to the whole channel, and so it was, quite frankly, even though it was tiring, it was exciting for me because I'd been selling and installing, supporting customers with systems similar to what I'm about to put together. So it was like Christmas every day. I mean, I was getting all this equipment in. I mean, it was, I'm sort of a geek in that respect, and building this thing out was just exciting as could be. It was hard work. It was, frustrating at times, but it was, and I was younger then, so I could do that.
How daunting was it? I mean, you mentioned you had a small company to undertake a task to put together a network, the infrastructure for a network. How, from your standpoint?
Well, as far as it really wasn't that difficult because I mean I had done similar things for customers. A lot of times. I mean, at that time I was 50 years old, so I'd been, I had several years of experience behind me, so it was not that difficult from that standpoint. The time crunch, not having, I went down to Orlando. I had no employees. I mean, it was like, so I'm trying to do all of this. I'm trying to build a staff. And of course, everybody else is doing essentially the same thing, we started with literally zero. And so we were all hiring people, you don't all, and particularly in that environment, you don't always make the best hires. I was lucky in that respect. I hired a girl named Michelle. At that time, her name was Michelle Walden. She was a young girl, about 20, late 20s. I don't remember exactly. Boy, she was smart as a whip, and she really fulfilled a lot of the things that I look for in when I'm hiring. I always want to hire people smarter than I am, and boy, she was definitely that. I mean, if you can't get over that bar, you don't need to be working for me. But yeah, the personnel probably, getting the proper personnel and getting them in the jobs that we needed done was probably the single biggest hurdle we had to get over. And Joe did a wonderful job of hiring the people at the executive level that were in the business, so to speak, in the TV business, because I'd never been in television. I owned a TV, but that was about the extent of it. And I watched it a lot, but we needed people who were actually in the business, and he hired some people that knew the business and knew the people in the business. So in that respect, they did a wonderful job of staffing up in production, in the technical end of the thing.
Who was in charge of hiring the talent, the early talent that came in?
Michael Whalen was our initial person to do that, and he brought in some pretty interesting talent. He had worked for HBO for a number of years. If you might remember Peter Kessler,
Yeah.
He hired Peter. He'd had experience with Peter, and so Peter moved down and just did a fabulous job from the beginning on that. I mean, he was a wonderful interviewer, a golf historian, so to speak, knew more tidbits of golf history than anybody I've ever been around. But yeah, and this is, an area that, like I said, my focus was pretty narrow as far as the channel itself. And Joe, I hope you get a chance to talk to Joe and interview him, because he can fill in a lot of gaps that I can't fill in. I had my own little thing to
Sure.
do.
How often did Mr. Palmer come around in those early construction phases?
Well, he was, and when I say this, I don't intend to in any way minimize his involvement at the Golf Channel, but the day-to-day was not something that he did at all. He was not involved in the management of the company. He was, and again, when I say this, it's not trying to minimize him, because I'll explain why I say that. He was pretty much in name only. We needed that. As I pointed out, we didn't have, and Joe in particular, didn't have any credibility in the golf community, but obviously
Right.
Mr. Palmer did, and that credibility and lending his name, and he would do things like interviews. He would do things, like the opening of the doors to certain areas that we needed. He was invaluable. I mean, it would have never worked without him.
Yeah.
But we didn't see him a lot day to day.
Right. Those early programming shows were really good. More that morning drive, and there's Lauren Thompson, and let's see, Brian Cam at some point was in there, and
I stayed up late lots of times figuring out should I really order the alien wedge or not.
Yeah.
Yeah, that kind of reminds me. We had this golf tournament once a year. It was called our VIP tournament, and we'd invite important people, like advertisers, cable operators, and so forth, investors, and we would have a little golf tournament at a nice place, and scramble kind of thing. And So I was playing with one of the investors, and he said, you know, and he was not a skilled player, but you know, maybe a 12 to 15 handicap or something like that. And he said, you know, I watch the Golf Channel all the time, and you know, I watch all these instructions, and he said, I think I'm getting worse instead of better. And I said, well, let me tell you, that all that instruction you see on TV, it's really we're kind of like a drug dealer. It's to sell, not to use.
Oh, that's funny.
That
Yeah.
it's a good segue into your golf game, because you came to golf kind of late, I
Yeah, I
guess.
did. Yeah, I didn't even take up the game until I was 30, and I was right in the throes of, you know, my career and raising a family, and so that was, you know, those were my two priorities. Even though I guess if my wife were here, she'd probably disagree that the family might not have been at times, because when I did take up golf, and it was just sort of a casual thing, and you know, I had always been interested in sports, participating in sports. I loved competitive athletics. You know, played high school football and baseball and basketball, and was good enough to make the teams and, you know, win letters and be, you know, have some amount of recognition in that, but never a threat to be a superstar. Uh, but I did love, you know, athletic competition. So the very first time I went golfing with some buddies that I was playing baseball with, uh, I immediately knew. In fact, I told Frances, my wife, I said, you know, I think I could really love this game, but I would have to get a lot better because it's the most frustrating thing I've ever tried to do. And it is. It was the hardest game I've ever tried to play. But and I guess that's the beauty of the game, is that it is such a challenge, and it just, you know, it's like you know, putting the carrot in front of the mule. I mean, the carrot's always out there, and we're always pushing toward it and pushing toward it, but we can sniff it once in a while, but we can't quite ever get hold of it. And that's kind of the way I felt. And you know, I don't like being mediocre, and I certainly don't enjoy being bad. And so I pushed pretty hard for a long time. And quite frankly, after approximately 50 years of playing the game, I still push hard. Uh, and you're like, well, how can an 81-year-old push hard uh, to get better at a game of any kind, you know? But I do. I mean, I play and practice every day, almost without a missed day. I mean, I don't pray. I don't practice long. I can't anymore. But I'll practice for 30 minutes to an hour every day, and play 3 or 4 times a week. So I'm still trying to get better. And actually, in reality, it's to just maintain. And I kind of use the analogy. It's kind of like a you know, when you reach a certain age, it's a little bit like swimming upstream, and they keep turning the water up. So you have to swim faster just to stay in one place. So that's kind of how I feel. But anyway, back to when I started. You know, I was the typical weekend player. I got to play, you know, most weekends at least once, and sometimes twice. And I was trying to, you know, juggle all these other things that I had going on. So that was not something I could really uh, concentrate on. And I got better. You know, within a couple of years, I was a low single digit handicap, and so I had some amount of, you know, natural ability to play the game. And at the age of 45, because up until then I was pretty much self-taught. And at the age of 45, I got a teacher, Joanne Beto. I don't know if you know of Joanne or not, but she was a protege of Jimmy Ballard, and I'm pretty sure you've at least heard his name. And they both had learned the game from Sam Bird. Sam Bird was a professional baseball player before he retired. He just happened to have been the traveling roommate for a fellow I know you've heard of. His name was Babe Ruth. This thing goes way back, obviously. But when Sam retired from baseball, he had been a golfer and quite a good one, because obviously he was a good athlete. And he later on in life, he had a little driving range over close to where Eastwood Mall used to be in Birmingham. And that's where Jimmy and Joanne learned golf, was from Sam Bird at his little driving range over there. They'd go over there and pick up golf balls for him in order to get lessons and being able to hit balls. So Joanne was my teacher for a few years and taught me an awful lot about the golf swing. And I still refer back to things that she told me almost 40 years ago now. And I became a much more consistent player. I was always capable of doing a lot of good things, but once or twice or three times around, I'd just hit foul balls, and you just can't score for a 3 or 4 day tournament. You do that just once around, and that's 3 times in a tournament or 4 times in a 4 day event. And if you're playing against good players, you're out. So anyway, I became a much more consistent player. My low scores didn't get a lot lower, but my high scores got a lot lower, and that's really what it takes to actually win like stroke play tournaments.
Mm-hmm.
And I would play. I had never played a lot of competitive golf, but I started playing in, as I got better, I played in the state amateur here in Alabama, and never was a threat to win, but I could make the cuts and, enjoy 3 or 4 days of golf. When I moved to Orlando, I joined Bay Hill, Arnold Palmer's golf course there in Orlando. I was playing with an awful lot of good players. So you learn an awful lot from playing with good players and watching them and the kind of way they manage the golf course and those kinds of things. So I got to be a lot better player, but I was not equipped. My game wasn't equipped for it, nor was my mind equipped to handle what was about to happen. And when I was 52 in 1996, I qualified for the U.S. Senior Open that was played at Canterbury in Cleveland, Ohio. I mean, like I said, I'd played in a few events, never a threat to do any good. And here I am in arguably the largest senior event of the year, U.S. Senior Open, playing with, Gary Player and Lee Trevino and Raymond Floyd and all of those names that we all know, that were the greats back then. I was way out of my comfort zone. I had a good round to get in there, and the qualifying was just an 18-hole event. So we put together a good round, and all of a sudden here I am. And it was an experience I had was not ready for, and I didn't play very well. I think I shot like 82, 88 or some crazy numbers, but it was certainly an experience in a lot of ways. And if I had had any ambitions of playing as a professional, which I had thought about, that experience dashed those. It was like, no. let me tell you, I had a practice round, and just turns out that when my son caddied for me during that event, and so we arrive at Canterbury, we sign up for our practice rounds. Well, I just took 8 o'clock Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and on Tuesday we walk out getting ready to tee off, and the starter comes up and says, "Mr. Gibbs, would you mind if another player joins you?" And before I could say anything, he said, "It's Mr. Irwin." And I'm like, "You talking about Hale Irwin?" And he said, "Yes." I'm like, "Oh yeah." So anyway, I play. Of course, if you probably know at that time he had just turned 50, not too many months before, and he was just the man. I mean, he was beating everybody. So it was a thrill. It actually was more of a thrill in some ways to play that practice round with him, and we had way more people watching us than I did when I actually played in the tournament. But I mean, there must have been 3,000 or 4,000 people that just followed us around. So anyway, so I'm playing with Hale Irwin. I couldn't tell he ever missed a shot. I mean, everything was just right down where you wanted. Everything was right at the flagstick. Every putt looked like it was going in the hole, and I'm like, I'm not accustomed to this. And so we kind of hit it off, and we were talking about one thing and another. And as we were walking up the 18th fairway, he said, "So you work for the Golf Channel?" And I'm like, "Yeah." He said, "You like your job?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I do." He said, "Keep it." It was good advice, and I took it.
Yeah, that's funny.
That's
Well, I
awesome.
guess being a member at Bay Hill, you've got some stories about Mr. Palmer.
I do. I've been so fortunate, and one of them was being at Bay Hill. Being at Bay Hill gave me the opportunity to play in the group that they have there called the Shootout, which Mr. Palmer had started years before. It was originally just, in fact, I think you had to be like a 5 or under handicap to even be considered to join the Shootout. That changed a little bit as everybody got older, but it gave me a chance to play with Mr. Palmer, and it turns out in the 15 years that I was a member there, I never kept count, but I probably played with him 50 times or so. So I mean, there are people in this world that would give their eye teeth to just have played with Mr. Palmer one time, and so I feel really, really fortunate. And we would have these bets. It was for a lot of money for me. I mean, we'd have these $50 matches, and a guy that you probably it was Bill Dameron, who is Robert Dameron's father. He was one of the guys we played against, along with Bruce Walters. Those were our two favorite people to play against. They were all good friends with Mr. Palmer. So we're having our usual bet, and $50 was all, and still is, quite frankly. $50 was a lot of money for me to bet on a round of golf, and so it was. I was playing to win, but I was also playing to keep from losing my $50. So we're playing them one day, and I'm playing pretty well, and Mr. Palmer's not playing all that well. And we have to wait on the 14th tee, which is a par 3, and the 13th green is right there. So they drive up, and they're playing in the group behind us. And one of them says, "Hey, Arnie, you want to just bunch the bets?" Which meant in their vernacular, do you want to call them off? So he said, "Yeah, oh, yeah," because he wasn't playing well. And then he remembered he had a partner. And he said, "Well, whatever John wants to do." Well, I'm thinking, if they're wanting to bunch, they must not be playing all that great. So I'm wanting to play. And so I said, "No, I want to play." And Mr. Palmer, he's like, yeah, that's what I like. This is the guy I like. So that's the way he was. And we get around to 16, there's a par 5 reachable with 2 good shots. And we both had hit good tee shots, and we're within range. And he's about 5 or 6 yards behind my ball, and he hits the 3-wood and hits it right in the water. So I had my 3-wood in my hand. I start back to my my bag, and he could be a little gruff at times. He says, "What are you doing?" And I said, "Well, I thought I'd better get my 8-iron and lay up since you knocked it in the water." And he takes a step toward me and he said, "Damn, boy, did you come out here to lay up?" And I'm like, "No, sir." Now, without asking, that I must have hit the shot on the green, or we wouldn't even be talking about it. So I did knock it on there and make my 4. But it really tells you, at least it told me, and I think it should tell everybody, the kind of guy he was as far as his attitude toward playing. I mean, he was not a layup guy. I mean, he went for it. I mean, that was his trademark style of play. I mean, he was an aggressive player, and it really, I can't say enough nice things about Arnold Palmer. And let me just talk to you a little bit about what I think of Arnold Palmer. You hear all of these people talk about Mr. Palmer, what a great guy he was, and this. Let me tell you, my experience is he was exactly that. He was a great guy, wonderful person to be around. I never saw him do anything that I thought was rude or uncalled for in that respect. And I have seen him countless times do things that I don't think I would have done to accommodate people, to sign autographs. And I think I mentioned to you when we talked about this preliminarily, I can't tell you how many times I've been in the dining room at Bay Hill, and he had a table back in the corner where he would have, family, friends, and so forth when he was there, and they'd have dinner around that table. And people from staying in the lodge, untold numbers of times, would come in to eat dinner, and they'd spot Mr. Palmer back there, and they were like, "Oh, look, there's Mr. Palmer. There's Mr. Palmer." And they would go back with some piece of paper or this or that, and to get an autograph. And he was always, I mean, without exception, always so gracious. Talked to them, made them feel special. And that's the thing. Everybody who'd ever met Arnold Palmer, he made them feel special. And I'll give you another example. My wife and I were, in fact, we were having dinner, I think, with Joe and his wife at Bay Hill. And we go in, Mr. Palmer's back in the back. Joe and I walk back and speak to him. My wife sits down at the table and doesn't go back. So while we're back there talking to his friends and family, he gets up. He recognizes that Frances is back there sitting alone. He gets up, walks back there, and speaks to her. But that's just the kind he was always aware of other people. He was a wonderful guy.
So how much money did you win that day when you knocked it on the green?
We were playing for $50, so I won $50. Now, I don't know about the other bets, but that particular one, yes, we won that bet.
I believe you live at Limestone Springs. How nice is it to have that course back restored to what it once was?
Oh, I tell you, our golf course right now is really, really good. And you probably know when this thing opened in 1999, and I moved here in 2000 after I left the Golf Channel, it was a garden. I mean, it was a wonderful, wonderful golf course. Mm-hmm. And I was playing a lot of senior amateur golf at that time. I never, not one time, left here and played it, and I played at a lot of nice golf courses, of course, and thought, wow, this is a lot better than I play on. I never did that. And it did go down. After a couple of changes in ownership, the golf course just went from being spectacular to terrible. I live here because I wanted to. I live next to a good golf course, and so we were looking at leaving. But then, actually, one of our neighbors, Russell Horan, who was an older guy at that time, he was like 88 or 89 when he bought it. His son also lived here. He rebuilt all the greens, did an awful lot of work other places, got rid of some trees, and we still are working on some things to get it the way we'd like to have it. But the golf course is really, really good right now. The greens are, about as good as you'll find in the South as far as bent grass greens. They're really good. It's a pleasure to play here again. But you told me early on you wanted me to talk a little more about my golf, and I'll try to make it brief. But I have had some amount of success. I've not only played in the U.S. Senior Open, but I've played 3 different times in the U.S. Senior Amateur, which I had to qualify for. The first time I played was the first year I was 55, which, in senior amateur, you have to be 55 plus. I qualified the first year. I did not make match play. The second time was in 2000, and I made match play, but I got beat in my first match. And then in 2003, I made match play, and I went to what they call the Sweet 16. So I had a little better success at that point. I've won state. I never won the state senior, and I'll talk about a guy that I love and I miss, who was, and I know when I call his name, we all know him. There are a bunch of guys in the state of Alabama that can say pretty much the same thing I'm about to say. If it weren't for Sam Farlow, I could have won a lot of tournaments.
Yeah.
But Sam Farlow was at a different level than most of the rest of us. A great guy. I loved Sam. Sam was one of the funniest guys I've ever been around. He always had something good to say, fun to play with, fun to watch. The man could just play golf.
Yes, he could.
He was. I can't tell you. When I found out that he had passed away, it was a sad day.
Yeah.
But if it hadn't been for him, how many guys could you get to say that in Alabama? If it hadn't been for him,
a lot.
I could have won some state titles that I didn't win, I probably, there's no doubt I wasn't the best a player in the state, but I've outlasted them. And what I mean by that is I don't know, and this is going to sound pretty boastful, and I'll just say it anyway. I don't know anybody that's near my age that can play with me. I can still shoot under par. I can't remember the last time I shot above my age. It's been years, and so I can still play golf at 81 years old, and
Yeah.
I'm obviously pretty proud of that. And I've had a number of people say, "What do you attribute your longevity?" And I can say there are 3 factors that I attribute to my longevity in golf. One, I had nothing to do with. I can't take any credit for it. My mother and daddy somehow or the other put together me, and I have a some amount of ability to play. And, the other two things, though, I do have some control over. As you age, you obviously are going to lose your athleticism, and some people lose it faster than others. I'm aging at a slower rate than some, but part of the reason I'm aging slower than some is that I've stayed fit my whole life. I've never allowed myself to get terribly out of shape. I've never been overweight. I've always stayed active and fit. I don't work out like I did when I was young. I'm not trying to get in shape to play football. I just want to play golf. And, to stay reasonably strong and flexible is extremely important. And so I can do something about that. And the other thing is, and this is equally important, I work on my mechanics all the time. I'm not afraid to make changes. And you think, well, 81 years old, how many changes can you make? Well, you can make a lot. I mean, if you're willing to work at it, you can continue to get better in your mechanics. Now, your scores may not get any better, but it's kind of like the swimming thing I was talking about. If you work on your mechanics, you can't ever get back your athleticism as you age. There's nothing you can do to get that back. Your hand-eye coordination is going to deteriorate. Your strength is going to deteriorate. Your speed is going to deteriorate. So what can I do to offset that? And that's to have a more efficient golf swing. And the other thing too, and this is why, when I practice, most of my practice is with my short irons and wedges, so that I can, and I practice my putting so that I can get the ball in the hole. If I can't hit the ball very far, I want to hit it where, as far as I can, but I want to hit it on line. And I find a lot more of my golf balls than I did when I was younger. So, and for two reasons. One is, if you don't hit it very far, it doesn't go very far offline. So,
Yeah.
or as far offline. So anyway, I do work on it. And I don't say that everybody should be like me. If everybody was like me, all the golf courses would be full, and we wouldn't be able to get a tee time. But and I learned some of this earlier, but was never able to internalize it to the point where I am now. If I had had the mental attitude that I have now when I was younger, I could have won a lot more tournaments. The one thing that, and this is true about every sport, every athlete, the biggest enemy of any athlete is fear. And the fear of failure is horrible. It can paralyze you. In golf, we have all these fears. And one of the things that finally I decided is that I'm not afraid to lose. If you're playing golf, you better be able to lose. And it's hard to win. First off, you're playing against 50 guys, 100 guys, and so you can catch a guy that may not be nearly as good as you on one of his good days or good 3 days, and he'll beat you. And particularly if you're not having your best stuff. So you're gonna lose. I mean, Tiger Woods in his best 10 years, he won 25% of the time. That was spectacular. But he lost, or didn't win. That's a better way to put it. He didn't win 75% of the time. So if you can't handle not winning, you better pick another sport or just take up piano.
Well, let's go back for a minute. And you played in 3 U.S. senior amateurs. Where were those held at?
The first one was at Portland Country Club in Portland, Oregon. The second one was at Charlotte Country Club in Charlotte, North Carolina. And the third one was at the Virginian, which is just out of Bristol, Tennessee, Bristol, there, one city right there. And that was where I had my best tournament. I had an interesting thing happen there. When I signed in, the pro heard me say something about who I was, and he walks over and he said, "So you're John Gibbs? You're from Oneonta, Alabama?" And I'm like, "Yes." He said, "Here's a phone number. Guy wants to talk to you." So I had my cell phone. I dialed it up. I don't know who it is, and so the guy answers. I tell him who I am, and he said, "Johnny Gibbs from Oneonta, Alabama." I'm like, "Yeah. Do I know you?" And he said, "No, you probably don't. I'm from Oneonta," and I'm trying to think of his first name. Steve Johnson. He had finished high school at Oneonta. He was an athlete. He got a scholarship to the Virginia Tech. He played tight end. Guy's 6'6". When he was in high school, he weighed about 185 pounds, but he'd gained a little weight since then. I didn't know him. He graduated like 1984 or 5 from Oneonta, and he played Virginia Tech. Drafted by the New England Patriots, played for the Patriots 6 or 7 years, and married Miss Virginia. And he and his father-in-law had built the Virginian, the golf course there called the Virginian. And so anyway, he said, "Are you at the pro shop?" And I said, "Yeah." He said, "Well, stand right there. I'll be right there. I'm at home." He had a home on the golf course. He comes riding up in his golf cart. Obviously you couldn't miss him. Big old, good looking, blonde haired boy. And he introduces himself to Francis. And he said, "Do you have a caddy?" I'm like, "No." He said, "Well, you do now. I'm going to caddy for you." He said, "I know this golf course like the back of my hand." So anyway, this guy just, befriends me, and we just had the best time. He did caddy for me. He didn't caddy for me during the match play, but he did for the first 2 days in the stroke play. So he had us over to his home, which was just spectacular, and we've stayed in touch all these years later. He's just a wonderful person. I can't tell you how much fun he made that tournament for me.
Yeah, that's a good story. Well, Greg, you got anything?
We could probably go for another hour.
That's probably a
it's
great place for us to
Yeah.
wind this up.
So for our listeners too, if you're at Limestone Springs and a guy named John shows up on the first tee and says, "Let's play for $1 or $2," probably don't want to play him. Hold on to your money.
Well, I got some guys that they still think they can beat me, and those are the best kind to have around.
Oh yeah.
No, some of them can. Well, we have three. There's 3 of us that we have a standing bet. We each put up $10, and we just play low score takes the pot. One of them is Lynn Moody, and Gary Randall is the second one. None of them are as old as I am, but we're about that same age. They're like 69 and 71, and so it seems fair. Whoever has a good day takes the $20.
I'm betting your jar full of money that you've taken is more than theirs.
I don't know. We don't keep up with it.
Well, great. Yeah, this has been a very quick hour and 20 minutes.
Absolutely.
Oh, has it been that long?
It has.
Yeah. Time flies when I'm talking.
We appreciate you taking some time. I know that you've got a tea time coming up, but thanks again for sharing your story, the early days of the Golf Channel, talking about some of your playing at a very high level in the senior ranks around the country. And keep Woody Eubank straight down there at Limestone Springs.
I'm not up to that task. But I will tell him you said hello.
Yeah, sounds good. Well, John, thanks again for spending a little time with us at the Cart Barn.
Well, you're welcome, and I feel good that you asked me. Thank you very much.
Thanks, John Gibbs, for showing up this week and providing us some more stories as we continue to document the early days of the Golf Channel. It's just fun listening to those guys talk about how everything was happening at once, trying to get a golf network up and running, getting staff together, getting studios built, getting financing. So I hope everybody's enjoying those, and we thank John for being here this week.
Yes, we do thank John for coming on and sharing some stories. And that's not the end of the Golf Channel saga and the early days and documenting its relationship to Alabama. We have more stories to share with you in the coming weeks. If you haven't liked, subscribed, or commented, especially on our YouTube channel, we would really appreciate it, and it would help us out a lot. Thanks again for listening, and catch us again next week for another edition of the Cart Barn Podcast.